Join Winnipeg Sports Talk, live from the NHL Draft in Las Vegas, presented by CoolBet, beginning on June 26th.
We are just a couple weeks away from heading down to Las Vegas, another year of Winnipeg Sports Talk at the NHL Draft, presented by our great sponsors at CoolBet Canada, and one of our favorites that we always like to catch up in person, but a nice little preview for what's to come as we welcome in Stephen Ellis, draft expert from DFO. What's going on, Stephen? How are you?
Not much, it's getting pretty hot here, but I'm looking forward to Vegas. It's my first time out there, and the Sphere is probably the coolest draft location we'll ever have.
Macklin Celebrini will go number one to the San Jose Sharks. From your perspective, Stephen, how huge of a victory was this for San Jose to hear their name going number one? How big is the drop-off? How clear of a number one pick is he for you? And maybe in comparison to some other years.
He's definitely clear number one. No one really came close. Some scouts have suggested maybe Anton Salaya, the defenseman, or Artyom Levshunov were very close. I just don't see it. What happens with Celebrini going out there and winning the Hobey Baker Award as the top NCAA player, that's never happened by a 17-year-old. He was one of the top scorers in the league. He was such a key driver of the World Juniors. He was putting up MVP-style advanced analytics before Canada got eliminated in that. And, you don't get guys as well-rounded as him often in the draft. I hate comparing first overall picks to other first overall picks before the pick happens, because you're comparing guys who have now played in the NHL compared to a guy who's still playing college. But with Celebrini, it's, the comparisons to Sidney Crosby and Jonathan Toews are real. There's a reason why you just see someone who's so well-rounded, who's got that offensive skill, the defensive skill, who can hit like a tank out there, and he plays with such a big brain. He's so smart. So that whole combination, he's a more rounded player than Connor Bedard, 100%. He's not a better player, not a more skilled player, but in terms of someone who can do a bit of everything, Celebrini's basically one of the best we've seen in a long time.
How, for our listeners and viewers, put it into perspective how rare it is for a player of his age to go to the NCAA, perform at the level he did, not to mention winning the Hobey Baker.
Yeah, because it's difficult because, most players will actually prefer having that extra year of junior hockey, and he basically skipped his sophomore season with the Chicago Steel in the USHL. But by doing that, he had to, do advanced classes. He was basically doing grade 11 and grade 12 at the same time. And so that's very difficult. We will always see a couple of college players that get drafted, but it's usually guys who were a later birthday the year before and weren't eligible the year before, like Zeev Buoyam this year. But then you get these rare instances where these guys will accelerate their school to be able to go earlier. And Matt Wood, actually, someone that Celebrini grew up kind of being neighbors with and knew him well. And that was another guy that kind of did the same thing last year. But when it comes to Celebrini, there's so much pressure as an NHL draft prospect, but to do your school so early so you can focus on hockey and make that your priority, yeah, that's not easy to do either. But, he kind of kept saying at the combine, I don't know if I'm going back to school. My understanding, he's not enrolled in school. He's going to be in the NHL next year, and that's where he deserves to be. He's so talented. But to see what he did this year, I've never seen a freshman season like that since I've started following the NCAA.
Well, and to his credit, you mentioned all the schooling he had to do to get to that point. He was in the NCAA. You've got classes. There is a lot to it as well. And he does seem to be incredibly well-rounded. And obviously his father, for those that don't know, I believe the strength and conditioning coach for the Golden State Warriors. So has had an elite, very high level of training and preparation for this as well throughout his life. How big's the drop-off from 1 to 2 for you? And is there a next sort of tier, if you will, of this upcoming draft, Stephen?
So I'm a big fan of Ivan Demidov, the Russian prospect. But if you read online discourse, we're talking about a lot of people saying, maybe he's not even a top 5 prospect. But he's the most skilled player in this draft, and I'm always going to bank on skill because he finds ways to be so creative. But I'd say him and then a couple of the defensemen are in this tier 2 of would it be Artyom Levshunov, the best defenseman, Anton Cilia, the 6'7" guy, drawing comparisons to Zdeno Chara, Sam Dickinson, the all-around master, Steve Bowie, 50 points in the NCAA as a defenseman this year, and who's the other one? Zane Parekh, who just scored like almost 40 goals and almost 100 points as a defenseman too. I'd say those guys are kind of all in their own group. Maybe you throw Caden Lindstrom, a 6'4" power forward there, but then it kind of drops off again. That's when you start to see a lot more variance. Of those guys I mentioned, they're all going to go early. It's just who goes second, who goes third, who goes fourth. That's the big question. There's no real consensus this time. So I think that's going to make it exciting. But I'd say, again, Celebrini is in his own group. Those other guys are in maybe group 2, and then it's go group 3, group 4, and just kind of fall off. I'd say about 15, 16, that's where you're not talking about a surefire, top 6 forward, top 4 defenseman, and you start to look for more guys who could maybe be more spark plug style guys, or more, maybe they start growing up and being these better players down the line. But, this is a good draft, not a great draft. That's kind of how I'm putting it.
We'll connect hopefully again in a couple weeks, either in Vegas in person. I know at that point you'll kind of have your final official list out with your rankings, a mock, which is always so much fun to talk to you about. But I right now, when you look at it, you mentioned this is a good draft, not a great draft. We're particularly interested in sort of the late first round, early second round, because the Jets have traded their pick, but they do have Montreal's second rounder. Thank you, PLD. It has been described to some people that I've talked to on this program that once you get through sort of the first 15 to 20 picks, there is a group, a tier of players, if you will, that teams' lists will have one guy at 40 on one and one guy at 20 on the other. I mean, are you of the opinion that it is sort of wide open for that next group, whether you're picking at 25 or whether you're where the Jets are, I think, at like 38 or so?
Yeah, it's so just varying all over the place, kind of the way you look at it here. Guys that I might think are at 50th overall, some might think are 25, and others might think it's 75. It's a really big question there. Then you've got goalies that can really spice things up, where there's no consensus on who the top goalie is. Our team's going to try and take a run at one at the second and bank on that talent, or are they going to wait till much later? I'm leaning on that. There's with so many good defensemen, it's kind of like it really depends on what teams are prioritizing. Size, maybe you go get an Adam Kleber at number 37. Maybe you go get Henry Muse, one of the more skilled offensive defensemen who just struggles at playing defense. Maybe you want a potential second, third line center, and you're going to Linus Eriksson. And there's just so many options in that, and it's so jumbled, which is both a good thing and a bad thing. There's a lot of questions. Like, if everyone's got completely different lists, you got to wonder how good these players really are. But at the same time, every team looks at the draft so differently. Their priorities are different, and I think that kind of just makes it a lot of fun.
Stephen Ellis, the Daily Faceoff, with us getting ready for the draft in Vegas. We'll be broadcasting live beginning on the 26th. Hope you join us throughout the week. I do want to ask you about one player in particular. And he is a household name, not for himself, but for his father. I obviously don't follow this anywhere as closely as you and some of the other guys that make your living in and around the draft, but it seemed like the spawn of Jerome, Tij Iginla, Jerome's son, has been a big-time riser this year. Tell us a little bit about Tij, about the season that he had and what he's done to his draft stock heading into Vegas at the end of the month.
Well, first off, I saw one comment from Jay Miller asking if Celebrini makes the Foreign Agents team. No, but the Olympics, I wouldn't rule it out. When it comes to Tij Iginla, I think, if he goes number 9 to the Calgary Flames, it won't be because of nepotism. It'll be because he actually deserves to be there. And I think that's what makes it really exciting. Last year, he barely played much of a role. The Seattle Thunderbirds, he got traded. Let's see what he could do on a new team where he was going to be one of those guys counted on to be a big point producer. He started as a center, moved to the wing, and that was huge for him because he put up a ton of goals, unbelievable shot, plays with so much energy. I'm thinking he's more of a 10-11 prospect, but I know some teams have him as high as number 2. And if that's the case, whoa, like that would be pretty interesting because that energy, the way he fights for the puck, he's got some of that tenacity his dad does. I don't think he's going to be someone who's going to be dropping the gloves like Jerome did, but he's going to go out there and just he's going to put the full effort out every single night. If he's not in a scoring role, he's going to be your best back checker. He's going to be your most aggressive bottom six player you could find. So that type of versatility is good. He's also got a brother coming in a couple of years who some say is better at the same age. So I don't know. We could see a couple of Iginlas in the NHL at one point, and then we could see an Iginla in the PWHL too.
You know, you mentioned Calgary picking at 9. And I mean, Pat Steinberg's a good buddy of mine from doing shows in the past. And it just seems like there is an incredible debate about Iginla when it comes to the Flames for obvious reasons. And it is important, the note that you made. If he goes there, it won't be because he's going to help them sell some tickets because people love his old man. It's that he has worked himself into a spot of a top 10 pick. When you think about the ceiling of a player like that, both on the ice and potentially off the ice, I mean, it's going to be an incredible decision for Calgary. And I mean, you know, they'll have to measure that with other players. But if he does turn into be a really good National Hockey Leaguer playing in Calgary where his dad is an absolute legend, it could be huge for the franchise. Although at the same time, if they pick him, considering the season they just had, everyone's going to be like, okay, when's Tij available to go? And I think like most players in this draft, not expected to contribute in the next couple of years.
He's a guy that I think with his work ethic, that if he has another season like he did this year, like he could be in the NHL in 2 years. But that would be more of a bottom six role, trying to grind his way up the lineup. And he's had to, you know, just because he had a last name doesn't mean he's had an easy ride. And he'll tell you that, like, he's had to grind his way through. Like, people wrote him off last year, and it was his draft minus 1 year. So, you know, there was still a lot of development to do. But the fact that he went from basically a depth guy on a competitive team to the guy on a mid-level team, but like still one of the best players in the WHL, it says just how good of a player he is. And Calgary has a couple of other interesting options. Like maybe they go out there and get Carter Yakimchuk, a defenseman who put up over 100 penalty minutes and 30 goals and over 70 points. You know, he plays for the Calgary Hitmen too, so they know him there quite well. And that's another guy to look at. But if they pick Iginla, like, there will be a lot of pressure, but it'll be at the same time, it's like Calgary is still a while away from being a truly competitive team. They still have a lot of question marks about what this group's going to look like long term. And if they can go out there and make a big piece of their team being this star player who teammates love and is a good leader, you know, I feel like he's got a perfect head on his shoulders and the right guidance that he's going to be able to handle the pressure as well as anybody.
All right, Steven, listen, we'll get into more of this, hopefully, draft week closer if we can grab you for a little bit. But let me end with one question for you. You can go on the record a couple weeks out of the draft. Who is there a guy that is sort of your guy, a guy that you are maybe higher on than many of your other contemporaries that you've seen play his way into a higher spot on your board than others? And tell us a little bit about the big move.
I'm taking Cole Eiserman. You know, I know there's the risk of a guy where if he's a goal scorer and he's not scoring, like what type of role does he have? But Cole Eiserman broke the U.S. national team scoring record this year, beating out the likes of Matt Tkachuk, Austin Matthews, Jack Hughes, Cole Caulfield, Patrick Kane, Bill Castle. Like, those are some incredible names he had to go out there and beat. You know, there's some questions about, you know, is he too cocky of a player? Can he understand his own weaknesses? Can he play strong defensively? I'll say this, of all the players in terms of, you know, a commitment to physical play in the top end of this draft, I have not seen a player prove as much as he has. And that alone is a good start. And I think when he goes to college and has Jay Pandolfo, who is very much wants all his players committed to playing defense, having him as the coach next year in college, I think he's going to benefit huge from that. And he's going to be a guy that if he slips outside of the top 10, there are going to be teams doing the same thing they did with Cole Caulfield a few years ago and saying, why did we skip him? Why did we skip him? So, you know, the hardest thing to do in hockey is scoring goals. He does it the best.
Steven, always great to have you on the program. We'll look forward to seeing you in person in a couple of weeks. Just on the way out, we're actually going to be here from your colleague, Frank Saravelli, who is in conversation with our new head coach, Scott Arniel, here in Winnipeg in a minute. fill people in on the upcoming draft coverage that you have planned that's going to be dropping a daily Faceoff in the next couple of weeks.
I'm doing a daily story every single day leading up to the draft. I'll be in Vegas, obviously, and I got a draft rankings coming out, I think, next Friday. It's my final one. And today I just posted a story on Anton Salayev, the defenseman, which, if I'm correct, might be one of the very first interviews he's actually done with an English outlet. So very happy about that one, and lots of coverage to come.
Dude, we'll look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thanks so much.